My insistence that a prosecutor who was viewed as corrupt be replaced was the official position of the President of the United States government, supported by Republican senators who sent a letter in 2016 calling for the removal of Cohen because of corruption, supported by the European Union, the International Monetary Fund, our allies, including the UK, France, Germany. What Trump did in Ukraine was to carry out a secret policy for his own personal political benefit in the hope that he wouldn't have to face me, and my guess is anyone else who he thought was likely to win. What I did was to seek to replace a weak prosecutor with one who we hope would go after corruption that is holding Ukraine back. The rest of the world was threatening not to continue to support Ukraine unless they dealt with the corruption. What Trump did was hold hostage political support and hundreds of millions of desperately needed dollars to a country at war to advance his own political demands. If they had been written as a sitcom, it wouldn't have been believed. I mean, think about this. And now there's a report that not only did Trump send Rudy Giuliani, a man of great integrity, his personal lawyer to carry out his scheme and co-opt the State Department. It's been alleged that the allies of Giuliani were working on a side deal at the same time to make millions in Ukraine. Just been alleged, I don't know for a fact. A corrupt scheme with an additional helping of corruption and self-dealing on the side. Classic Trump.
This is Joe Biden making headlines today by being the latest Democrat to come out in support of impeachment for Trump. And this comes after weeks of Trump trying to use Biden as a scapegoat for his own corruption in Ukraine, wherein the president leveraged $250 million in military aid in exchange for the promise of an investigation into Hunter and Joe Biden. But in a break with precedent, only a sprinkling of Republicans have clung on to this talking point, and the reason is because it's patently untrue. Hunter Biden was never being investigated by a Ukrainian prosecutor, which Ukraine itself has acknowledged. Joe Biden didn't push for the corrupt Ukrainian prosecutor's ouster to protect his son. He did it and joined a slew of other European countries and international bodies because the prosecutor was failing to pursue corruption, including corruption in the company Hunter worked for. In other words, Biden pushing for the corrupt prosecutor's dismissal actually boded worse for his son. And the White House knows that, but this isn't about uncovering facts or rooting out corruption. It's just to show Biden in a bad light, to present him as corrupt, to give Trump a talking point against his current principal opponent heading into the general election. And keep in mind, Trump had demanded that both Ukraine and China open these investigations into the Bidens, all because he believes that an American politician's son made too much money thanks to his dad's job as vice president, at the same time that Trump's daughter is reaping a windfall of Chinese trademarks because her dad is the president. And at the same time that Ivanka and Jared Kushner made $82 million in just the last year. And $3.9 million of that came from Ivanka's stake in the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., which has become a way station for politicians and foreign diplomats looking to curry favor with the White House. And look, I know hypocrisy is a staple of the Trump administration, but the lack of self-awareness here is almost scary. And of course, not to be outdone by himself, it gets worse. Because while Trump is crowing about his oh-so-noble pursuit of extorting Ukraine with US taxpayer dollars to do his political bidding, there's also the fact that Republican donors were touting connections to Giuliani and Trump while trying to oust the current management at the top of Ukraine's multi-billion-dollar state gas company Naftagaz. Their effort was ultimately spearheaded by Energy Secretary Rick Perry, who sought to replace the current management team with a friendlier team, including Texans, literally trying to install Republicans from Texas on the board of a Ukrainian gas company who would then be able to steer lucrative contracts to companies controlled by Trump allies. Because behind everything this administration touches is money. So for Trump to pretend that he's out here fighting corruption, when not only did he try to extort the president of Ukraine into interfering in our election, after not only have his kids made money hand over fist because of their father's office, but his own administration is using his influence to steer cash toward Trump's buddies, is so insanely hypocritical that, well, that it actually makes perfect sense for Trump. So Biden is right to call for Trump's impeachment, even if it did take him an extraordinarily long time to do so. And he's right to take a swipe at Giuliani, who might have honestly been a man of integrity at one point before contracting every last ounce of it out to Trump and tying himself to a sinking ship. Because while both will undoubtedly try to deflect attention away from themselves any way they can, their projection is as tired as it is obvious.